On a cold dawn in 59 BC, the sound of iron on wood rang across the frozen passes of the Alps, and the fate of an empire trembled with every strike. The camera swoops over mist-shrouded alpine peaks, drifts down to a bustling Roman road, then slips into the marble-cold interior of a bustling frontier outpost on the edge of the Roman Empire. A drumbeat of marching feet fades into the low murmur of soldiers and merchants. The Republic is a giant of stone and steel, its legions marching from Britannia to Syria, yet even giants can be brought low by a single blade hidden in the shadows of the mountains. We are in Raetia, 59 BC, the wild frontier where Rome's order meets the fierce independence of alpine tribes. The empire's legionaries patrol the ford of Castra Regina, their polished armor glinting against the gray sky, their discipline a stark contrast to the ragged warriors of the Genouni who watch from the cliffs, eyes burning with ancient grudges. The tone is epic, gritty, and atmospheric, a story of power, betrayal, and the thin line that separates civilization from barbarism. Our niche is the Roman Empire, and every detail, from the Aquila standards to the Caligay boots, pulls the viewer straight into that world. In this place, the pulse of conquest drums louder than any heart, and every sunrise could bring glory or ruin. Scene 1. The Frontier Fortress. The narration follows Lucius Valerius Corvinus, a young centurion of the Legion Rapax, fresh-faced yet bearing the scar of a skirmish on his forearm. He strides through the Principia, saluting the Optio and exchanging curt reports. Centurion Lucius Valerius Corvinus, son of a modest farmer from Capua, now bears the weight of Rome's ambition on his shoulders. He has seen the empire's might, but he has never faced a threat that could topple it from within. A messenger bursts in, breathless, bearing a sealed scroll. The seal bears the emblem of Gaius Julius. The camera closes on the trembling wax as Lucius breaks it. Caesar writes of a new threat, an alliance of alpine tribes gathering beyond the passes, united under a warlord named Brennus, who swears to bleed Rome's borders dry. Lucius feels the cold bite of fear. He knows the legion is stretched thin, the frontier barely held. The open loop. What will Lucius do when the empire's edge begins to crumble? The council of the tribes cut to a fire-lit clearing high in the mountains. The camera weaves through cloaked warriors, their faces painted with woad. Brennus, a towering figure with a scar slicing his cheek, stands before a crude map of the empire. Brennus lifts a rusted iron spear, its point glinting like a promise. Rome thinks its roads are veins, but we will cut them and watch the blood spill. He rallies the chieftains, the Genouni, the Venones, the Raeti, promising loot, glory, and revenge for generations of raids. The tension spikes as a young warrior questions his leadership. What if Rome sends its legions, the youth asks. Brennus laughs, a sound that rolls like thunder. Then we will show them that mountains are not walls but swords. The scene ends with the tribes chanting a guttural war cry that echoes down the valleys, a sound that will haunt Roman ears. The cry fades into the distant howl of wind across the fort's walls, where Lucius now stands, eyes narrowed, listening. The dilemma. Back inside Castra Regina, Lucius gathers his Optio, Marcus, a veteran of many campaigns, and the fort's praefectus, Decimus. The praefectus is a grizzled man, his face a map of old battles. We have fewer than 6 centuries of men, Decimus growls, and the supply lines are fragile. If Brennus truly unites the tribes, we face a tide of steel. Lucius proposes a daring plan. Send a small elite scouting party into the mountains to learn Brennus's strength and buy time. Marcus warns of the danger, invisible, the cold a killer. We could lose our best men, Marcus says, his voice low, or we could lose everything if we do nothing. The tension builds as the 3 men debate, the stakes crystal clear. The open loop deepens. Will Lucius risk his men for intelligence, or will he gamble on a desperate defense? The inciting incident night falls. The fort's torches flicker like distant stars. A messenger arrives again, this time bearing a fresh order stamped with Caesar's seal. Secure the alpine passes, no retreat. The camera zooms onto Lucius's eyes, reflecting firelight. The order is both a lifeline and a noose. Caesar's ambition pulls Rome deeper into the mountains, and Lucius must become the hinge of destiny. He takes a solemn breath, steps forward, and declares to his men, "We will march at first light. We will find Brennus's army and bring his plans to ruin, or die trying." The drumbeat of marching feet returns. now a steady, relentless rhythm that drives the narrative forward. The drumbeat morphs into the distant roar of a river, leading us to the final beat of Act 1. The departure and Act 1 climax. Dawn breaks, golden light spilling over the snow-capped peaks. Lucius leads his hand-picked scouts, a mix of legionaries, auxiliaries, and a reluctant local guide named Eldrick, who knows the passes like his own veins. They slip through the gates, the massive wooden doors closing behind them with a resonant thud. Beyond the walls, the Empire's might walks on foot, each step a promise that Rome will not fall without a fight. The camera pulls back, showing the fort silhouetted against the sunrise, the vastness of the Alps looming, unforgiving, unknowable. If you were Lucius, would you march into the unknown mountains to meet a shadowy enemy, or would you hold the line and pray the storm passes? Pause for audience reaction. The iron wall of Roman shields shattered like into the ridge, and the very earth trembled beneath the clash. The camera swoops low over the mist-laden battlefield of Bannockburn, then snaps to a distant alpine pass where Lucius and his scouts crouch behind jagged rocks. The sound of distant horns reverberates, a pulse that drives the story forward. In the mountains, every breath is a gamble, every heartbeat a drum of war. The fate of Rome now hangs on a thread woven by a single centurion's choice. Scene 1. The ambush in the pass. The narration follows Lucius Valerius Corvinus and his elite scouting party as they slip deeper into the crags. The cold bites through their cloaks, the wind whistles like a warning. Lucius signals silence, his hand gripping the hilt of his gladius. The guide Eldrick pauses, eyes scanning the snow-drifted ledge. Suddenly, a stone rolls, clattering down the slope, a sound too deliberate to be nature. A volley of javelins erupts from hidden crevices. One finds its mark in a legionary's thigh. The man cries out, his voice muffled by the wind. "Hold," Lucius shouts, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Form a testudo." The scouts huddle, shields overlapping, a fragile turtle against the storm of alpine steel. The tension spikes. Every heartbeat echoes the question, will the testudo hold? The clang of metal fades into the distant rumble of drums from a Roman camp far below, reminding the audience that the legion awaits news. The first revelation. The scouts drag their wounded comrade into a shallow cave. Eldrick tends the injury, his fingers deft despite the trembling cold. "You saved my life," the legionary rasps, eyes wide with fear. "What do we do now?" Lucius studies the map etched in dirt, his finger tracing the treacherous passes that lead to Brennus's stronghold. "We have two roads," Lucius says, voice low but steady. "The northern ridge, a narrow goat trail that could hide us, or the southern gorge." Eldrick whispers, "The gorge is guarded by the Venones. They know every stone. The ridge is where Brennus gathers his warriors. If we go north, we meet the storm head-on." The narrative builds suspense. Which path will decide Rome's fate? The audience feels the weight of choice. The crackle of a dying fire merges with the low murmur of a Roman outpost's evening prayer, pulling the viewer back to the larger conflict. The night raid under a blood-red moon, Lucius leads the scouts onto the northern ridge. Snow crunches beneath their boots, breath forms clouds that dissolve like ghosts. Silence is their armor. Every step could betray them to eyes that see in darkness. Suddenly, torches flare on a distant outcrop, Brennus's sentries. The scouts freeze, hearts pounding like war drums. "Hold your breath," Lucius murmurs, "or become a story told by the wind." A patrol of Alpine warriors passes inches away, their faces fierce, eyes scanning. The tension is palpable, the audience leans in. What would you do, watching a blade edge hover between life and death? The patrol moves on. The scouts exhale, a collective release of tension. They slip deeper, discovering a hidden valley where thousands of tribal warriors gather. A sea of painted faces and sharpened spears. The sight of the massive force plants a seed of doubt. Can a handful of scouts change the tide? The distant clang of weapons being sharpened blends into the rhythmic hammering of a blacksmith in the Roman fort, signaling preparations for war. The return and rising action. Dawn paints the sky crimson as Lucius and his men sprint back toward Castra Regina. The wounded legionary stumbles. Lucius hoists him, refusing to leave a comrade. "Rome does not abandon its own," he growls, muscles straining. They reach the fort's gates just as the praefectus arrives again, bearing fresh orders. All units to converge on the Alpine front. No retreat, grip tightens. But the news Lucius brings is a double-edged sword. He reports the size of Brennus's horde, the strategic choke points, and a daring possibility. The gorge could become a trap if the Romans use fire and terrain. We can turn the gorge into a furnace, Lucius argues, eyes alight. We'll seal the entrance, rain fire upon them, and crush the tide. Marcus, the veteran Optio, counters, our men are tired, supplies low, a siege will bleed us dry. The tension escalates into a council of war, each voice a thread pulling tighter around Rome's fate. The sound of a distant Alpine war horn crescendos, merging with the low chant of legionaries marching in formation, signaling the looming clash. The Battle of the Gorge. The Romans mobilize. Legions march to the gorge, engineers carry pitch and torches. The camera flies over the narrow canyon, rocks jagged like teeth. The gorge yawns like a mouth ready to swallow an army whole. Brennus's forces pour in, confident in the narrowness. Romans unleash fire arrows. Flames lick the stone walls, turning the canyon into a furnace of smoke and terror. Now, Lucius commands, and the legionaries thrust torches into oil-soaked timber. The blaze roars, a wall of fire that drives the enemy back into the river. The Alpine warriors panic, crushed between flame and water. Bodies pile, the river runs red. In a single morning, the gorge becomes Rome's furnace, and Brennus's dream of conquest melts away. The tide turns. The Romans press forward, shields clashing, swords singing. The battlefield becomes a symphony of steel and fire. Can a single canyon decide the destiny of an empire? What would you do if you held the lever that could turn a battlefield into a furnace? The narrative crescendos. The audience feels the fade to a soft, somber wind over the battlefield's aftermath, pulling the story into its emotional denouement. Aftermath and new threat night blankets the gorge. The Romans tend to their wounded, the air thick with ash and grief. Lucius walks among the fallen, his face smeared with soot, his heart heavy. He finds Eldric alive, clutching a broken spear. Eldric whispers, "You saved us, but the tribes will not forget. They will regroup, find another way." "Rome never rests," Lucius replies, "but neither does the mountain." A messenger rides in, bearing a scroll sealed with Caesar's insignia. The camera zooms on the wax. Prepare for a new campaign. The Gauls stir, the Germanic tribes move south. The empire is a fire that never dies, but its embers spread everywhere. The new threat looms. Will Lucius survive the next storm, or will the endless wars consume him? The return to the fort. The legion returns to Castra Regina, triumphant but weary. The praefectus greets them, eyes shining with respect. "You have turned a mountain into a shield," he says, voice reverberating across the courtyard. Lucius receives a military decoration for valor, yet his gaze drifts to the distant peaks. Glory is fleeting, the mountains watch, indifferent, waiting for the next footstep. The narration slows, a reflective cadence. What lies ahead for a man who has stared into the abyss and seen his own reflection in fire? The sound of a lone soldier's footsteps echoes into silence, leading directly into the Iron Legion that broke mountains, now break the Empire's own heart. The camera pulls back from the smoldering gorge, drifting over the scarred landscape as a lone eagle circles above. The wind carries ash and distant horns, a reminder that war never truly ends. Rome's soldiers have turned fire into a weapon, but every victory sows the seed of a new battle, the return to order under a bruised sky. Legionaries carry the wounded on stretchers. The Aquila standard flutters defiantly, despite the soot staining its feathers. Lucius rides beside the Optio, Marcus, his armor still warm from the blaze, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for the next storm. The praefectus greets them at the gate, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "Your courage has saved this frontier," he says, but the empire does not pause for breath. A messenger from Rome arrives, bearing a sealed scroll. The seal bears Caesar's insignia, the words barely visible through dust. "Prepare for a new campaign." The Gauls stir, the Germanic tribes move south. The empire is a fire that never dies, but its embers spread everywhere. The narration eases the tension, allowing the audience to feel the weight of duty and the cost of glory. The distant clang of armor fades into the low murmur of a campfire within the fort's walls, leading to intimate reflections. Reflections in the campfire. Lucius sits beside the fire, the flames licking shadows onto his scarred hands. Eldric joins him, clutching a battered gladius. You fought like a god of war, Eldric whispers, eyes reflecting flames. Will Rome remember the men who forged its borders? Lucius pauses, the crackle of fire a metronome for memory. Rome remembers victories, not the faces behind them, he replies, voice steady. But the mountains remember every footstep. The narrative weaves an emotional thread, triumph tinged with melancholy, heroism balanced by humanity. The question lingers, what will Lucius carry forward when the Empire's banners fade? The fire sputters, its ember glow merging with the first light of dawn spilling over the fort's walls. The new threat unfolds. Morning reveals a rider bearing fresh intelligence. A coalition of Gallic tribes led by Vercingetorix's former lieutenant, Caratacus, has crossed the Rhine. The Empire's borders are like a river, the scout reports. They swell beyond their banks. The praefectus summons his officers. The council gathers around a table strewn with maps, ink staining the parchment like blood. We must split the legion, Decimus argues. Send a vexillation to Gaul, hold the Alpine passes. Lucius steps forward. If we divide, we weaken the heart. The gorge proved that terrain can defeat numbers. Let us use what we learned. He proposes a strategy. Construct fortified lines along the Alpine ridge, use fire and engineering to deny the enemy passage, and send a rapid task force to harass their supply lines. A war of attrition, Marcus adds, but we have the discipline of Rome. The tension builds subtly, not through clamor but through the gravity of decision. The drum of marching feet returns, now a measured cadence of preparation rather than panic. Engineering the defense days pass. Legionaries fell timber, forge spikes, and dig ditches. The camera glides over the construction of a limes, a wooden palisade reinforced with stone, watchtowers jutting like sentinels. Every log placed is a promise that the Empire will not yield its ground. Lucius oversees a team of engineers recalling the fire-torn canyon. Remember the gorge, he tells them. Make the mountains bleed for any who try to climb. Night falls, torches line the new wall, a line of light against darkness. What does a wall protect when the enemy walks unseen? The audience feels satisfaction. Rome adapts, survives, evolves. Open loop, the wall stands, but the Gallic horde approaches. Curiosity remains. The distant howl of wolves blends into the low chant of legionaries marching in formation, a sound of unity. The final clash, Caratacus's forces arrive, a tide of painted shields and fierce war cries. They attempt to scale the ridge. The mountains echo with screams, but the legion holds firm, shields interlocked like stone. Lucius leads a sortie down the slope, his gladius flashing, cutting through the press. For Rome, he shouts, voice cracking the night. The battle is fierce yet controlled. The narrative reduces steam, focusing on strategy over spectacle. The enemy falters, their momentum broken by fire and discipline. When the sun rises, the field lies silent, but for the groans of wounded. Caratacus retreats, his dream of invasion smoldering like the gorge's flames. The Romans stand victorious once more, but the cost is visible in every scar. The wind carries away ash, revealing a calm horizon. Resolution and reflection. Lucius returns to Castra Regina not as a hero crowned in laurel, but as a centurion bearing responsibility. We have bought time, the praefectus says, but the empire is a tide that never rests. Lucius looks to the mountains, his gaze steady. Every stone we move writes a story, he murmurs, and every story shapes the empire. The narration closes with a gentle cadence, offering the audience satisfaction and closure. Will the empire endure because of men like Lucius, or will it fall because of its own endless wars? If you felt the fire of Rome's battles, the weight of its decisions, and the hope of its people, share this story and comment below. What do you think is the greatest strength of an empire? Press the bell for more tales from ancient worlds, and let history speak through our voices. The camera rises above the fort, the eagle soaring higher, the music swelling, and the screen fades to black.